Cameron calls it a day. The former Prime Minister quits as an MP. It's less than 3 months since he resigned the top job at number 10. Now he tells us he wants a life outside Westminster and he doesn't want to get in the way of his successor.
As a former Prime Minister, it is very difficult, I think, to sit as a backbencher and not be an enormous diversion and distraction from what the government's doing. I don't want to be that distraction.
Also tonight, Hillary's health, the growing questions haunting the woman who would be president.
The questions faced by the delivery company accused of failing to pay the minimum wage.
Rio's Rio, the little boy inspired by the Paralympic heroes of Team GB.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mark Austin and Mary Nightingale.
Good evening. David Cameron signalled the end of his political career today, announcing he was stepping down as an MP. The leader, who gambled and lost over Europe, quit as Prime Minister in June. He now says he wants out of Westminster altogether and is looking forward to a new life.
Mr Cameron told ITV News it was a sad day for him, but he felt he would be a distraction to the work of his successor, Theresa May. He also says he doesn't know what he's going to do next. Mr Cameron spoke to our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Shipp.
He said he would stay as the MP for this affluent corner of Oxfordshire, but Witney will now have a new Member of Parliament. And moments after he told Theresa May he was quitting, David Cameron explained why he did it.
Well, I spoke to Theresa May and she was very understanding about this decision. I support her. I support what she's doing. She's got off to a cracking start. Obviously, I'm going to have my own views about different issues. People would know that. And that's really the point. As a former Prime Minister, it is very difficult, I think, to sit as a backbencher and not be an enormous diversion and distraction from what the government's doing. I don't want to be that distraction.
His announcement, though, is 3 days after his successor announced plans to expand grammar schools, a policy he didn't and clearly still doesn't think will work.
There's lots of merit in the policy, but frankly, I don't want to get into the wheres and why-fors of this individual policy.
Given what you've said about grammar schools, it rather suggests you simply do not support their expansion.
Well, no, I think that's not a fair reflection of what we did. We did actually allow the expansion of grammar schools in areas that had them, and we did set up selective sixth forms, particularly in our big cities. And as I say, I think there's some merit in the policy that's being put forward. My announcement today is not about grammar schools. There's no connection with grammar schools. It's purely one of timing.
So the timing means David Cameron will no longer be a distraction, at least not as a sitting Tory MP. David Cameron began his life as the Witney MP in 2001, a young and fresh-faced Tory when the Tories were no match for Tony Blair.
We didn't do enough to get them excited about what the Conservative Party offered.
And within 4 years, he was leader and doing what he could to get voters excited, trying to change the public face and the direction of his party, famously heading to the Arctic, doing things Tory leaders don't usually do. It all took him to an election victory, but in 2010 he was not an outright winner, and he showed his practical side when he changed his approach on coalition to match the reality he was facing.
Well, I think David Cameron deserves some credit for helping to establish the first post-war peacetime coalition and help to deliver progressive things like the Liberal Democrat pupil premium policy. But sadly, the reality is that his legacy will be one of having taken a very short-term party political gamble on a referendum on our membership of the European Union.
And after pulling off austerity, growing the economy, equal marriage, a referendum in Scotland and a second election victory, it is his failure on the EU which pushed this man out of politics for good.
I love this country and I feel honoured to have served it.
You will admit now, though, won't you? You will be remembered mostly for taking this country out of the European Union.
Well, I'm sure I will be remembered for keeping that pledge to hold a referendum, when many people thought that promise would never be kept. But I hope people will also look back at the 11 years I was leader of the Conservative Party and 6 years as Prime Minister of our country as a time when we did create a stronger economy. 1,000 people found work for every day I was Prime Minister, and we did make some important social reforms.
Less than 2 months ago, he was Prime Minister.
Prime Minister, David Cameron, former Prime Minister. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
It's all changed with such speed it's taken many of us by surprise.
So, Chris, we saw you there speaking to Mr Cameron. What do you read into his decision to step down now?
Well, Mark, I found him to be in a very reflective mood today. Look, if you take the view that he resigned because he couldn't do his job as the former Prime Minister, or whether you take the view that he's decided to do something much more lucrative, unhindered by the rules on MPs' earnings, I think it is a big decision for any MP to give up the area that they've been representing for such a long time. In Mr Cameron's case, it was 15 years. And this whole issue of grammar schools, yes, the timing is coincidental, but I think it perfectly explains the context around that decision. I don't think he said at any point in that interview that he fully supported Theresa May's policy on selective schools in England. And therefore, I think whatever he said about this policy or any other policy in the future would have taken on that elevated significance. Now, of course, he said many times he would carry on being an MP for Witney. And I think his friends tell me that actually he might have made a different decision had the Tory leadership election not ended so abruptly in the way that it did back in July. So the decision he took today, he said, was after a summer of reflection and not, he says, connected to any particular policy.
All right, Chris, thank you very much indeed.
The former Education Secretary, Nicky Morgan, has told ITV News she doesn't think Theresa May's grammar school plans will get through the House of Commons. Like Mr Cameron, we just saw, she has concerns about the bill, which was formally presented to MPs today. Our political correspondent Paul Brand is in the House of Commons. Paul, how strong is the opposition to these plans?
Well, when you consider that the government only has a majority of 12, I don't think we were far off that today in terms of the number of Conservative MPs expressing concerns about grammar schools. It was quiet concern in the Commons, but I am told by several of them their feelings run far deeper than that outside of the chamber. After all, this was just the Education Secretary, Justine Greening, laying out a consultation on grammar schools after these plans were already announced by the government last week. Now, all eyes today were on her two immediate predecessors, Michael Gove, who gave his fairly strong support, and Nicky Morgan, who is fast becoming the arch critic of grammar schools, as she told me earlier.
Well, I think I would want to get a lot more understanding of how the government thinks that areas where education standards are too low are going to opt for selective schools, and why they think those selective schools would make a difference to all children in that area. And until those reassurances are given, until that explanation is given, I need to study the Green Paper in detail. I think it will be difficult to support the proposals as they currently stand.
But as it stands, do you think the government's got a real challenge on its hands here getting this through?
I think the government has a real challenge on getting this through. I think you could see just from the questions on the government benches today that colleagues are looking for a lot of reassurances.
Well, no vote on this yet. The consultation's got to run first. Enough time perhaps to get Conservative MPs on side before this has to get past Labour and the Lib Dems in the Lords.
OK, Paul Brand in the Commons. Thank you.
Now, it may become a pivotal moment in the US election campaign, the moment that Hillary Clinton appeared to collapse after attending a memorial service. Today, it emerged the 68-year-old candidate has pneumonia and will be resting for at least a few days. While her team are playing down the illness, her health is suddenly a major election issue. Her Republican rival, Donald Trump, said he'll release his own doctor's record soon. From Washington, Emma Murphy reports.
Good morning. Her health. Hillary Clinton cancels the trip to California after abruptly leaving a 9/11 ceremony at Ground Zero.
As a presidential candidate who sought to play down health issues, the American networks will make difficult viewing for Hillary Clinton today.
Hillary Clinton will no longer be making a campaign trip to California scheduled for Monday and Tuesday.
Yesterday's very public collapse is all over the American media, and it's hardly surprising. A potential future commander-in-chief apparently being hoisted into her van, feet dragging, head lolling, and clearly unwell, is subject to much discussion. Despite being back in front of the cameras within 2 hours, what makes this a major campaign issue is that her team initially said it was a simple case of overheating, only conceding she'd been diagnosed with pneumonia when footage of her at the van emerged.
Are you feeling better?
Yes, thank you very much.
With the 68-year-old recovering at home, her team are now on the offensive, saying that they will release more medical records.
We're going to be releasing that to further put to rest any lingering concerns about what you saw yesterday. I can attest, Andrea, that it really is the case that there's no other undisclosed condition. The pneumonia is the extent of it.
She also lacks the mental and physical stamina.
In a campaign during which fellow nominee Donald Trump has sought to make his rival's health an issue, he was unusually cautious in his response today.
It was quite sad, to be honest with you, and I hope she gets well soon. No satisfaction, believe me, whatsoever.
So far, Clinton has resisted making public too much medical information and laughed off a cough last week.
Every time I think about Trump, I get allergic.
But her political standing means history notes her past, including the concussion which led to a blood clot in 2012. She had to wear special glasses to counter double vision, and that was the second clot she'd had. With just 57 days to go before America decides, the health of the candidates and how open they are about it has just become an even bigger campaign issue.
So, Emma, all very awkward for Mrs. Clinton. Will this continue to be an issue, do you think, in the campaign?
Without question, this is going to continue to really dog the Clinton campaign. You know, she has two problems here. This is about illness, but it's also about integrity. She can take a pill to sort out the infection, but she can't take anything to really try and tackle this problem she has in the American people's eyes, that she lacks integrity. And that's been reinforced by the fact that the team were not completely open and honest immediately when she was diagnosed with pneumonia, or indeed when she appeared to collapse yesterday. And Donald Trump, although he's offering kind of gentle words there, make no mistake, he's really out to make the most of this. He says that he's going to make his medical records public this week, and he's also going to go on to one of the major talk shows to discuss his health. The invitation is there now for Mrs. Clinton to do exactly the same thing.
Emma, thank you very much.
Well, the British man accused of trying to grab a policeman's gun at Donald Trump's rally is to plead guilty in return for a reduced sentence. Michael Sanford was arrested at the rally in Las Vegas in June. He's charged with being an illegal alien in possession of a firearm and disrupting government business.
When the sun set in Syria this evening, just a couple of hours ago, it was a moment of hope for a country desperately short of it. At that moment, what's planned to be a week-long ceasefire got underway. If it holds, and it's a big if, much-needed aid will finally get in for tens of thousands of civilians.
It is only a limited truce, with Russia and the United States still planning to bomb Islamic State and other extremists. And opposition groups fear it will only help President Assad, as our international affairs editor Raghi Omar reports.
Even in the hours before the ceasefire came into effect, it was war as usual in Syria, with heavy bombardments by government planes on Aleppo. The Syrian regime intent on pressing their advantage to the last minute in a city which has been besieged by them and starved for months. The ceasefire comes on the holy Muslim day of Eid al-Adha, which President Assad celebrated this morning in the Damascus suburb of Daraya. Only a week ago, he would have been dead if he'd set foot in this neighborhood. It was a stronghold of militant groups opposed to him. But now, after ferocious fighting and bombardment, it is in his firm grip. By coming here, he said, we want to send a message that the Syrian government is determined to recover every area from terrorists. His swagger and confidence reflected the sense within the regime that the momentum is with them. Little wonder rebel groups fear this latest ceasefire, however temporary, will only help him and his regime. The Syrian government has welcomed the ceasefire. The opposition Free Syrian Army is also due to observe the truce, but says it has major reservations. Despite rejecting the deal earlier, the influential militant group Ahrar al-Sham is now expected to also support the ceasefire. The so-called Islamic State is not even part of the deal. At the same time, UN and relief organizations have been pre-positioning food and medicines in the hope that the accord holds, allowing them to get into some of the worst affected areas, none more so than the northern city of Aleppo. But once the Syrian government that had been bombing them welcomed the ceasefire, the mood amongst Aleppo's weary people changed. And for once, there was a sense of relief that a pause in the fighting could become a reality. But this ceasefire will not bring peace to Syria. It won't even bring an end to all fighting. Both the US and Russia have said they will continue to strike Islamic State and the many other jihadist groups in this complex civil war.
Raggy, many ceasefires have come and gone, haven't they? What chance, if any, does this one have of being more successful than the others?
Very, very slight, I think, and that's putting it rather mildly. I think that this was negotiated essentially between Russia and the United States. There were no Syrian participation in it. Those groups that have gone along with it have done so incredibly reluctantly, calling it half a solution because they fear that it will just help President Assad. What it will do is it will give aid agencies a sense in which they will be able to get humanitarian aid into Aleppo and other areas. But the fact is that, as we've been saying, numerous times on this program, that the forces in Syria have not exhausted themselves. There are still people who feel they want to fight on. President Assad today himself was saying he wants to take back every inch of territory from terrorists. So I think it's a brief pause, but nothing more than that.
Raggy, thank you.
An unidentified woman could hold clues to the murder of Stephen Lawrence 23 years ago. The 18-year-old was stabbed to death in southeast London in an unprovoked racist attack. Detectives have now uncovered female DNA on a bag strap found at the scene, thanks to advances in forensic testing.
And a brick has been thrown through the office window of the Labour MP Mary Craig. The building in Wakefield was empty at the time, but staff at the constituency are said to have been left distressed following the incident. West Yorkshire Police has launched an investigation.
The boss of a delivery firm accused of paying below the minimum wage says she's personally shocked and hurt by the allegations. Carol Woodhead, who runs Hermes, says the firm is committed to learning and improving. The company, which has John Lewis as a client, is facing an investigation by the tax inspector HMRC. Here's our business editor, Joel Hills.
The name Hermes may not be familiar, but order online with the likes of Next, Debenhams and John Lewis, and the chances are you'll be paid a visit by one of their couriers. Peter Jamieson used to deliver parcels for Hermes. When his wife was diagnosed with terminal cancer 3 years ago, he requested time off. He says the company ultimately responded by withdrawing all of his hours.
After explaining how stressful it was at home and asking for help through the management, just simply to be ignored, and basically told everybody in Hermes has problems, and it was my business type thing, and I was to sort it out myself.
10,500 couriers work for Hermes, although technically they are self-employed. They're paid for each parcel they deliver rather than by the hour. And as they are self-employed, they don't qualify for either sick pay or holiday. And they're not legally entitled to either the national minimum wage or the living wage of £7.20 an hour. According to a new report, some couriers earn as little as £3 an hour. Hermes UK rejects that idea and insists staff aren't forced to work through illness and bereavement.
I don't recognise some of the allegations that are out there in terms of the style of our business. We're actually quite a family-run type business. We are open, we're supportive, we're caring. I care.
The head of the TUC told me she believes an unacceptable number of companies are thriving by exploiting their staff.
We're now seeing millions of workers, not just on 0 hours contracts, but full self-employment, agency contracts that seem to go on forever without ever achieving permanent rights. I think a lot of people are worried that the balance of power has gone too far in favour of employers.
78 people have complained about pay and conditions at Hermes. HMRC is considering an investigation. Hermes will soon start deliveries for Sports Direct, another company accused of mistreating its workers, and they are not alone. The GMB union has taken legal action against Uber, arguing their 12,000 taxi drivers should be given permanent contracts. The verdict is expected next month. Consumers love low prices, so companies understandably want to keep their costs down, but they also need to do the right thing by their staff.
All right, Joel, thanks very much indeed. Joel Hills there.
Samsung has seen its shares plunge by nearly 7% and £11 billion wiped off its market value after the recall of its latest smartphone. The company has urged customers not to use the Note 7 phone and to exchange the device due to fears it might catch fire.
Brighton's I-360 tower has been closed for checks after it broke down for the second time in a week. Last Thursday, around 180 visitors were stuck in midair for a couple of hours, with 200 more people trapped yesterday.
And it is being reported that the current series of the Great British Bake Off will be the last to air on the BBC. It's understood the company behind the programme broke off talks to renew their contract with the broadcaster. It is not yet known which channel will air the show instead, but you can find out more on our website, itv.com/news.
And finally, Britain's latest gold medalist admitted he got a little carried away today after being crowned Paralympic table tennis champion. After the winning shot, Will Bailey stood on top of the table to milk the crowd's applause.
And there was plenty of emotion too from Aled Davis as he won gold in the shot put, and it followed an unprecedented 24 hours, which saw Britain win 21 medals. Richard Pallow reports.
If ever in any doubt about what it means to be a Paralympian, let Will Bailey demonstrate.
He's done it now, Will Bailey!
Victory in the table tennis singles celebrated by a leap onto the table itself. A hug for the official who carded him for doing it. But this was not about getting a yellow, but a gold. Bailey has muscle wastage in his limbs which restricts mobility. His joy at succeeding in Brazil, surely one of the images so far. Aled Davis has also been to the top of the rostrum. Shot put success for Johnny Peacock's roommate here in Rio. David Weir sacrificed being at the birth of his son Lenny yesterday in the hunt for medals. But the wheelchair racer, 4 times a winner in London, could only come 5th in the 400 metres. He will hope his decision will be rewarded in events still to come.
It's been superb.
Cyclist Jody Cundy has been reflecting on his 2 gold medals here. The amputee even had his cycling leg painted with a treasure map after failure in 2012.
That was my whole motivation for getting here for Rio. I even had a paint job on my leg with a treasure map on with a trail all the way from London to Rio, and managed to find my pot of gold when we got here. So yeah, it was pretty special.
Late last night, fellow amputee Richard Whitehead defended his 200 metres title, while Bethany Firth won a 2nd gold in the pool. 21 medals in a single day for the British team, well deserving of a thank you. And for one particular 8-year-old, a chance to wear the gold of triathlete Andy Lewis. Rio was named following his parents' honeymoon to the city, but had his leg amputated at 14 months after being born without a tibia and ankle and knee joints.
I've held a few gold medals, but they're like plastic.
Or chocolate.
Yeah. Chocolate. Yeah. Once I had a gold medal that was as heavy as one, but it only had a gold medal wrap around it, but it was a big chocolate gold medal. I think I remember.
His new blade, the same as the athletes are wearing, an illustration of just what can be achieved. Richard Pallow, ITV News, Rio de Janeiro.
Rio Wolf, yeah, champion.
Bless the
Wonderful.
lad. And how well are Britain doing?
I know,
so
amazing.
they're 2nd in the medal table now behind China. I've got the tally here, 25 golds, 14 silver, and I think it's 15 bronze.
58
Not bad.
medals altogether. Not bad, is it? OK, that's all for now. Tom Bradby will be here with news at 10. There'll be more on the decision by David Cameron to step down as an MP. Plus, we will have reaction to tonight's news that the Great British Bake Off is to come to an end on the BBC. Where will it pop up then?
Who knows? But from all of us here on the Evening News, have a very good night. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.